Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Labour's Shadow Housing Minister, Emma Reynolds, and from Westminster by the Communities and Local Government Minister, Brandon Lewis. Emma Reynolds, Michael Crick helpfully included that clip of you on the programme last time talking about this, saying that rent controls won't work in practice, that you tweeted, it is not Labour Party policy to introduce rent controls. I'm guessing you've been sent for re-education since then?
No, I stand by what I said. I am not in favour of 1970s-style rent controls in which the government went in and established rents.
I don't think that was the question at the time. I think you've reinvented what Cathy asked you.
Well, no, we are not proposing that kind of system. What we're proposing is that the initial rent would be decided by the market, as it is now, in a negotiation between the landlord and the tenant. But over the course of a 3-year tenancy, which would give families and couples and others who are settled in the private rented sector much more security and stability. Over that time, they would have predictability in terms of rent increases because there would be a ceiling to those. This works in other countries. Ireland introduced it 10 years ago, and there's been a growth in the private rented sector there. In Germany, 60% of the market is made up of private rental sector.
I think we can see the re-education has worked from this answer.
I stand by what I've said, and what I was describing then was 1970s rent control, and I'm not in favour of that. I'm not in favour of that now, and I wasn't then.
Brandon Lewis, the trouble is there's going to be millions of people who agree with this and love the idea of it because we do now have a very disturbing generation rent.
Well, this is a short-term gimmick, and the experts today are already highlighting that, as you've just outlined. The reality is we need a strong, proper, long-term economic plan that gets people into homes, doesn't create that kind of problem that we've seen elsewhere in the world where rent control has been tried, and you actually encourage higher prices and potentially encouraging people to have a legal subletting. It's just not the answer. We need more supply.
Where in the world have these particular ideas been tried and failed?
Well, if you look at what's happening, New York is one of the highest places in America for the cost of rent, because you're looking at a city idea. Well, rent control doesn't work because it pushes prices up. That's what ICS has said today. What we do need is to see that increase in housing supply. We inherited the lowest level of house building in generations. We've got it up to 420,000 properties now built since 2010. We're going to move towards seeing the fastest rate of building, 165,000 of new affordable homes, the fastest rate for 20 odd years we're going to be seeing. And that's what we need, that increase in building so people can get onto the housing ladder.
Emma Reynolds, that is basically the point you have always made, that the real problem is house building.
Well,
and you have both failed on this.
Well, look, there's been a growing gap between supply and demand over decades, but it's true also to say that this government hasn't fulfilled its promises.
Well, neither did you.
Last year, look, this has been a growing, as I say, this has been a problem for quite some time. We are determined, when we get back into government, to double the rate of house building. Last year, only about half of the homes that we need in England were built. Why is it under this government that house building has fallen to its lowest level since the 1920s in peacetime? Your
record in government was appalling on house building, as you well know, which is why we're in this mess.
Before the crash, in 2007, 170,000 homes in England were built. I'll take our record over this government's record any time.
But you'll accept that even that number was woefully inadequate.
Well, but it's better than the 107,000 we saw last year.
Minister, the point that the housing charities are making is that if we carry on at your rate, the average house price will be £1 million within a few years.
Well, what Emma's just outlined, and you made the point quite rightly, we inherited the lowest rate of house building in generations. We've now got the fastest rate of new home construction since 2008.
And it's still pathetically low.
We do want to see more supply. We've got 420,000 houses
since
built.
When?
We've now got since 2010.
Yeah. So how many is that a year?
420,000 since 2010.
How many a year?
And the policies we've put in place.
Doesn't sound
and
so
I'm not
good if you
pretending
break it
this is a complicated long-term economic plan to make sure that we get people their ability to get onto the housing ladder. That's what's going to show us the fastest rate of affordable house building in over 20 years at 165,000.
I mean, the thing is, you've trotted out the line that you've all been given today, which is short-term gimmick. That is also, of course, what you said about Labour's ideas on energy pricing, which basically set the agenda and you've now essentially come round to.
Well, the problem with any kind of price cap and a rent control like this is it actually encourages the market to go to the highest level. So you end up with all of those properties that would not necessarily be able to get the highest market rent driving that way in the first place. So the people, the most vulnerable people who will need those homes at an affordable price end up paying more, and it actually crushes supply.
Emma Reynolds, come back on
Importantly,
that.
we need to get that supply up, and this policy would crush supply.
Brandon, why did your boss, Eric Pickles, back in October, launch a consultation on delivering long-term tenancies with index-related rent increases? You're saying one thing in October, and you're saying a totally different thing today. Don't you think that families should have stability in their tenancies? Don't you think that there should be longer-term tenancies? In which case, why are you saying you're against it, or why are you doing a consultation on it?
What we want to make sure is that we don't have a problem. Labour's policy at the moment, apart from being a gimmick, actually has a real risk of crushing supply. We've got supply going again. It's taken some time to do that due to the atrocious inheritance we got. And what we have consulted on is a framework that would allow people to have some protection out there. Well, that's very different to having rent controls.
OK, Brandon Lewis and Emma Reynolds, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. That's it for tonight. Until tomorrow, that is Channel 4 News. From all of us on the team, a very good evening.